They lied to us. Nick Aldis lied. WWE management lied. Everyone pointing fingers at Jimmy USO, everyone analyzing security footage, everyone buying into the narrative that this was about bloodline family drama. You were all played. Because the real attacker who took out Jacob Fatu in that vicious backstage assault just revealed himself on SmackDown, and it's not who anyone expected. Drew McIntyre, the Scottish warrior who has been absent from WWE television for weeks, just made the most shocking return in recent memory by walking into that arena, finding Jacob Fatu backstage, and finishing what he started weeks ago. And when I tell you why Drew targeted Jacob, when I explain the real reason behind this attack that has nothing to do with the bloodline and everything to do with Drew's personal vendetta against Roman Reigns, and when I reveal what Drew said after the attack that suggests this is just the beginning of his campaign of destruction, you're going to realize that SmackDown just became a war zone and Jacob Fatu was only the first casualty. Let me break down exactly what happened tonight because the footage is absolutely insane and the implications are going to reshape the entire landscape of WWE. SmackDown was about halfway through the broadcast, coming back from a commercial break, when the cameras suddenly cut backstage to absolute chaos. Medical personnel were rushing down a hallway. Producers were yelling into headsets. Security was forming a perimeter around something. And as the camera got closer, we saw Jacob Fatu lying on the concrete floor, motionless, with what appeared to be severe head trauma and multiple wounds across his back and shoulders. Standing over him, breathing heavily, covered in Jacob's blood, holding a steel chair that was bent and mangled from repeated impacts, was Drew McIntyre. But here's what makes this moment so shocking and so different from the typical surprise return. Drew didn't smile. He didn't play to the cameras. He didn't cut a promo or make any grand statements. He just stood there, staring down at Jacob's unconscious body with cold, empty eyes that showed absolutely no remorse, no satisfaction, just pure mechanical violence. When security tried to approach him, Drew raised the destroyed chair in a threatening manner that made them back off immediately. He wasn't there for a pop. He wasn't there for a wrestling angle. He was there to hurt someone, and everyone in that backstage area knew they were witnessing something real and dangerous. Nick Aldis appeared on the scene within seconds, and what happened next is what's causing the most controversy and confusion. Aldis looked at the scene, looked at Drew McIntyre standing over Jacob Fatu with the weapon, looked at the security personnel waiting for orders, and then Aldis did something completely unexpected. He told security to stand down. He told medical to take care of Jacob. And then he looked directly at Drew and said, "Is it done?" Drew nodded once, dropped the chair, and walked away without saying a single word. Aldis let him leave. The SmackDown general manager, the authority figure who just last week was conducting press conferences about workplace violence and zero-tolerance policies, allowed Drew McIntyre to commit a brutal assault and walk away without immediate consequences. That interaction between Aldis and Drew is what has the wrestling world absolutely losing their minds right now. It suggests this wasn't an unauthorized attack. It suggests Drew had permission to take out Jacob Fatu. It suggests there's a level of conspiracy and coordination between Drew McIntyre and WWE management that completely changes our understanding of what's happening on SmackDown. Why would Nick Aldis sanction an attack on Jacob Fatu? What possible justification could there be for allowing one wrestler to ambush and brutally assault another wrestler backstage with weapons? And what does this mean for the integrity of WWE as a company if authority figures are actively participating in or enabling violence outside the ring? Michael Cole and Corey Graves on commentary were speechless for almost 30 seconds after the cameras cut back to them in the arena. You could hear in their voices that they weren't reading from a script, that they were genuinely trying to process what they just witnessed and figure out how to explain it to the audience. Cole eventually said, "I don't know what we just saw. I don't know if that was sanctioned. I don't know what's happening backstage right now. But Drew McIntyre just attacked Jacob Fatu in a manner that was vicious and brutal and frankly terrifying." Graves added, "If Drew had permission to do that, we need to know why. If he didn't have permission, he needs to be arrested. This isn't wrestling. This is assault." But the story gets even crazier because approximately 20 minutes later in the broadcast, after medical had transported Jacob Fatu out of the building and after the show had continued with other segments trying to maintain normalcy, Drew McIntyre walked out to the ring. He was cleaned up. The blood was washed off. He was in street clothes rather than ring gear. And he had a microphone. The crowd didn't know how to react. There were some cheers because Drew is popular and people were excited to see him back. There were some boos because people just watched him commit a heinous act. And there was mostly confused silence because nobody knew what was happening or what Drew was going to say. Drew stood in the center of the ring and delivered one of the most intense, uncomfortable promos I've ever heard. He said, "4 weeks, everyone has been asking where is Drew McIntyre? Why isn't he on television? What happened to the Scottish warrior? I'll tell you where I was. I was watching. I was studying. I was planning. And I was waiting for the perfect moment to declare war on the bloodline and everyone associated with Roman Reigns' empire." Jacob Fatu made the mistake of aligning himself with Roman. Jacob made the mistake of being Roman's enforcer, Roman's weapon, Roman's loyal soldier. and I made him pay for that mistake. But Jacob is just the beginning. The crowd was dead silent during this promo. Drew continued. Roman Reigns has avoided me for too long. He's hidden behind championships, behind family, behind excuses about taking time off and focusing on his legacy. But Roman knows I'm the one person in WWE he can't manipulate, can't control, and can't beat when I'm at my best. So I'm going to dismantle everything he's built. I'm going to take out every member of his family. I'm going to destroy every ally who pledges loyalty to the tribal chief. And when there's nobody left to hide behind, Roman Reigns will have no choice but to face me one-on-one. And I will take everything from him just like he tried to take everything from me. That promo is significant for multiple reasons. First, it confirms that Drew's attack on Jacob Fatu was premeditated and part of a larger campaign against the bloodline. Second, it establishes that Drew sees himself as being at war with Roman Reigns specifically, not just with the bloodline as a concept. Third, and most importantly, it promises that Jacob is only the first target and that other bloodline members are in danger. Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, potentially even the Usos if they get drawn back into bloodline business. Everyone with ties to Roman is now a target for Drew McIntyre. But the most shocking moment of the promo came at the end when Aldis walked out onto the stage. The crowd expected Aldis to announce Drew's suspension or firing, to condemn his actions, to restore some sense of order and consequences. Instead, Aldis said, "Drew, what you did tonight crossed every line of acceptable conduct. It was violent, brutal, and went against everything WWE stands for. However, given the unique circumstances of your grievance against Roman Reigns and the bloodline, given the history between you and Roman that never received proper resolution, and given that WWE management believes the fans deserve to see this conflict play out to its ultimate conclusion, I'm making an exception to our standard policies. You will not be suspended. You will not be fined. You will be given the opportunity to continue your campaign against the bloodline with one condition: it stays between you and them. No innocent parties get caught in the crossfire." The crowd erupted at that announcement, but not entirely in a positive way. There were loud cheers from people who want to see Drew wreck the bloodline. There were equally loud boos from people who think WWE is endorsing violence and abandoning any pretense of rules or consequences. And there was a massive "this is awesome" chant mixed with bullshit chants, creating this chaotic audio environment that perfectly captured how divided people are about this storyline direction. Aldis essentially just announced that there are no rules when it comes to the war between Drew McIntyre and the bloodline, and the implications of that are staggering. Let me take you back through the history between Drew and Roman, because understanding their past is crucial to understanding why this is happening now. Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns have been dancing around each other for years. They've had matches, they've had confrontations, but they've never had the definitive feud that settles who is the better wrestler and the bigger star. Every time they started to build towards something major, one of them would move to a different brand, or one of them would get pulled into a different storyline, or circumstances would prevent them from having that WrestleMania-level program that both of them deserved. The most frustrating near-miss was during the pandemic era. Drew won the WWE Championship in front of an empty arena at WrestleMania 36, one of the most bittersweet moments in wrestling history because Drew finally achieved his dream but with no fans there to celebrate with him. Drew carried Raw through the pandemic, having great matches and great programs despite the empty arena limitations. Meanwhile, Roman returned at SummerSlam 2020 as the Tribal Chief and began his historic championship run on SmackDown. For months, fans wanted to see Drew versus Roman, champion versus champion, but WWE kept them separated on different brands. When they finally had a Survivor Series match in November 2020, it was fantastic, but it was just one match with no real stakes or storyline behind it. Roman won, but it was treated as just another Survivor Series brand warfare match rather than the beginning of a major feud. Both men went back to their respective brands and continued their championship runs, and the dream match people wanted never materialized into the program it should have been. Drew eventually lost his championship, went through a period of floating without clear direction, and watched as Roman's Tribal Chief character elevated to heights that Drew's championship run never quite reached. There's been an underlying current of Drew feeling like he was overlooked and undervalued compared to Roman. Drew has cut promos over the past year hinting at frustration that Roman gets all the attention, all the acclaim, all the WrestleMania main events, while Drew's contributions to WWE during the pandemic are treated as a footnote. Drew has suggested in interviews that WWE management sees Roman as the star and everyone else, including Drew, as secondary players. That resentment has been building, and apparently it reached a breaking point that led to Drew deciding to take matters into his own hands. The specific catalyst for Drew targeting Jacob Fatu now, according to reports and some of Drew's comments in his promo, relates to a backstage incident several weeks ago that didn't air on television but has been circulating among wrestling insiders. Drew apparently confronted Roman backstage at a SmackDown taping, demanding a match at a major pay-per-view to finally settle their rivalry. Roman, being the manipulative political genius he is, reportedly laughed it off and said something to the effect of "You're not on my level anymore, Drew. You had your moment and you blew it. I'm not wasting my return on someone irrelevant." That comment, that dismissal, that disrespect from Roman is what apparently sent Drew over the edge. But instead of challenging Roman directly and getting tied up in negotiations and political games, Drew decided to attack Roman's interests. Jacob Fatu is Roman's most dangerous enforcer, the muscle that Solo Sikoa has been using to maintain bloodline dominance. By taking out Jacob, Drew is sending a message to Roman: your army isn't safe, your family isn't safe, and eventually you won't be safe either. Drew is using psychological warfare and systematic destruction rather than following traditional wrestling protocols of challenging someone to a match. The conspiracy theory element comes from Nick Aldis's behavior and his apparent sanctioning of Drew's attack. Why would a WWE general manager allow this? The most popular theory circulating right now is that WWE management, operating through Aldis as their proxy, wants Drew to weaken or destroy the bloodline. Think about it from a corporate perspective. The bloodline has dominated WWE programming for 3 years. They've held championships, main event the biggest shows, and been the centerpiece of nearly every major storyline. But that dominance has also created stagnation where other talent can't break through, where the same people are always in the spotlight, where the show feels predictable. WWE management might see Drew McIntyre as a solution to their bloodline problem. Drew is popular, talented, credible, and angry enough to believably wage war against the faction. By tacitly approving Drew's campaign of violence, by looking the other way when he takes out bloodline members, WWE can weaken the faction without having to book them to lose matches or look weak in traditional storylines. It's guerrilla warfare rather than conventional booking, and it gives WWE plausible deniability. If anyone complains, Aldis can say he's just allowing competitors to settle their differences, that this is between Drew and the bloodline, that WWE isn't officially sanctioning violence but also isn't going to prevent wrestlers from defending their honor or pursuing their vendettas. This theory is supported by Drew's comment in his promo that WWE management believes fans deserve to see this conflict play out. That's not typically language wrestlers use unless they're acknowledging real-world business considerations. Drew essentially broke the fourth wall to tell the audience that WWE as a company has decided the storyline is what's best for business, regardless of how uncomfortable or violent it becomes. That's a fascinating metatextual layer that blurs the line between the fictional world of wrestling storylines and the real world of corporate decision-making. The other major question everyone is asking is whether the original attack on Jacob Fatu that happened weeks ago was also Drew. We were told it was Jimmy USO. Nick Aldis held a press conference with security footage allegedly showing Jimmy as the attacker. But now that Drew has revealed himself and claimed responsibility for waging war on the bloodline, people are wondering if Drew was actually responsible for the first attack too. Was the Jimmy USO accusation a red herring? Was Drew working with Nick Aldis even back then to frame someone else and throw everyone off the trail? Or were there actually multiple attacks, with Jimmy responsible for one and Drew responsible for another? The timeline is confusing and possibly intentionally obfuscated by WWE. If Drew was responsible for the original attack weeks ago, why did he wait this long to reveal himself? Why allow Jimmy USO to take the blame? Why let everyone believe it was bloodline internal drama rather than an external threat? The only explanation that makes sense is that Drew wanted chaos and confusion. He wanted the bloodline tearing itself apart trying to figure out who the traitor was. He wanted them paranoid and divided before he revealed himself as the real enemy. That would be brilliant psychological warfare, turning the bloodline against themselves before striking openly. Jacob Fatu's current condition is obviously the most immediate concern, and the reports coming out of WWE medical staff are not encouraging. According to Backstage sources, Jacob suffered another severe concussion, this time his second in just a few weeks. In combat sports and contact sports, second impact syndrome is a serious concern where suffering a second concussion before the first one has fully healed can lead to catastrophic brain injury. WWE's medical protocols would normally require Jacob to undergo extensive neurological testing and potentially be sidelined for months to ensure his long-term health and safety. But here's where things get ethically murky. If Jacob Fatu is removed from action for an extended period due to these injuries, Drew McIntyre will have successfully accomplished his goal of eliminating Roman's top enforcer. The bloodline will be weakened. Solo Sikoa will have to find a new muscle. Drew will have scored a major victory in his war. But at what cost? Jacob is a human being with a family, with a career, with long-term health to consider. WWE allowing Drew to repeatedly target and injure Jacob, even within the context of a storyline, raises serious questions about duty of care and whether the company is prioritizing entertainment over wrestler safety. The locker room reaction to Drew's return and attack has been mixed according to multiple reports. Some wrestlers are reportedly thrilled that someone is finally standing up to the bloodline and bringing chaos to a storyline that had been getting stale. They see Drew as a warrior doing what needs to be done to shake up the status quo. Other wrestlers are reportedly very uncomfortable with the level of violence and the apparent lack of consequences, worried that this sets a dangerous precedent where anything goes and management won't protect people from legitimate harm. There's concern that if Drew can get away with this kind of attack, what's to stop other wrestlers from using similar tactics to settle scores or advance their positions? Interestingly, there have been reports that Roman Reigns himself has been in contact with WWE management about Drew's actions. Roman is not currently under contract to appear on WWE television on a regular basis, having negotiated a part-time deal that gives him significant control over his schedule. But sources say Roman has made it clear that Drew's campaign against the Bloodline will bring him back to television sooner than planned. Roman reportedly views Drew's actions as not just a storyline development but as a personal disrespect that demands a response. If that's true, if Roman Reigns is legitimately angry about Drew targeting his family members, we might see Roman return in full tribal chief mode ready to destroy Drew in ways we've never seen before. The match that everyone is now predicting and demanding is Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. That's the endgame everyone sees for this storyline. Drew systematically taking out Bloodline members over the next several months, Roman eventually returning to confront Drew and defend his family, and the two of them finally having the definitive match that should have happened years ago. If WWE can build to that properly, if they can maintain the intensity and importance of this feud over the long term, it could be one of the best WrestleMania main events in recent memory. But WWE has to be careful about several potential pitfalls. First, they can't let the violence become gratuitous or meaningless. Every attack needs to feel important and have real consequences. If Drew is just beating up Bloodline members every week with no repercussions and no escalation, it will get repetitive and boring. Second, they need to give the Bloodline opportunities to strike back and make Drew vulnerable. If this is just Drew dominating every encounter, he'll be too strong and the eventual match with Roman won't feel like a genuine fight between equals. Third, they need to make sure other storylines on SmackDown don't get completely overshadowed by this feud. There are other talented wrestlers who deserve time and attention, and if every episode becomes the Drew vs. Bloodline show, those other performers will suffer. Let's talk about Drew's character evolution because what we're seeing now is a significantly darker version of the Scottish Warrior than what we've seen before. Previous iterations of Drew McIntyre have been either a smiling babyface fighting for his dreams or a confident heel who respects combat and wants to prove he's the best. But this Drew is something different. This is a Drew who has given up on playing by the rules, who has abandoned any pretense of honor or sportsmanship, who is willing to use weapons and tactics that would have been beneath him previously. This is Drew as a pure weapon of destruction, and it's a character we haven't really seen him play before. The question is whether WWE can maintain Drew's popularity while having him commit increasingly violent and arguably villainous acts. Wrestling fans have a complicated relationship with anti-heroes. We tend to cheer them when they're going after targets we don't like, but if they cross too many lines or hurt characters we sympathize with, the support can turn quickly. Right now, Drew is getting cheered because most fans don't particularly like the Bloodline and enjoy seeing them get their comeuppance. But if Drew starts attacking more sympathetic characters, or if his violence becomes too brutal and disturbing, fans might turn on him. WWE seems to be positioning this as a shades of grey situation where neither Drew nor the Bloodline are clear-cut babyfaces or heels. The Bloodline has been oppressive and dominant for years, making them natural targets for someone looking to bring chaos. But Drew's methods are extreme and concerning, making him not exactly a hero either. That moral ambiguity could make for fascinating storytelling if WWE has the courage to really explore it rather than defaulting to traditional good guy versus bad guy dynamics. The merchandise opportunities from this feud are also significant from a business perspective. Drew McIntyre shirts with slogans about destroying the Bloodline will sell. Bloodline gear emphasizing family loyalty in the face of external threats will sell. WWE can market this as the feud of the year, as must-see television, as the storyline that will define the company for the next several months. From a pure business standpoint, having Drew back as a featured player in a high-profile program is valuable for WWE's bottom line. Social media has absolutely exploded with reactions to Drew's return and attack. Twitter trends were dominated by Drew McIntyre, Jacob Fatu, and SmackDown hashtags within minutes of the show ending. YouTube clips of the attack and Drew's promo are getting millions of views. Reddit threads are filled with hundreds of comments analyzing every detail. Wrestling podcasts are recording emergency episodes to discuss what happened. The level of engagement and conversation is exactly what WWE hopes for when they do something shocking and controversial. But not all the conversation is positive. There's a significant contingent of fans who are expressing concern about glorifying violence, about the message WWE is sending by having authority figures sanction attacks, and about whether this kind of storytelling is appropriate given increasing awareness of CTE and long-term health consequences of head injuries. These are legitimate concerns that WWE needs to acknowledge and address, even within the context of fictional storytelling. There's a responsibility to not trivialize serious health issues or make light of workplace violence, even in an entertainment context.